When an HOA Karen sent heavy cement trucks across my small private bridge like it was public property, she didn't just ignore warnings. She triggered a chain reaction that exposed their negligence, collapsed their project, and turned a simple shortcut into a mistake that cost them millions. The bridge wasn't impressive. It didn't have guardrails, signage, or concrete pillars. It was a modest wooden and steel span I'd built years earlier to cross a narrow section of water separating my land from the main road. It existed for one reason only: to support my pickup truck and farm equipment, not 40-ton cement mixers. And everyone knew that. At least, they should have. The bridge sat entirely on my property. No easements, no shared access, no ambiguity. I'd paid for it, maintained it, and reinforced it to the exact load limits I needed. I even posted a small, clearly visible sign at the entrance: "Private bridge, weight limit enforced." That sign disappeared the same week the HOA began its lakeside expansion project. The trouble started quietly, the way HOA disasters always do. One afternoon, I heard a low, unfamiliar rumble, too deep to be normal traffic. When I stepped outside, the ground vibrated under my boot. Then I saw it. A cement truck. Not on the public road. On my bridge. It crept forward slowly, suspension groaning, tires grinding against planks that were never meant to bear that kind of weight. Water sloshed beneath as the bridge flexed, just slightly, but enough to make my stomach drop. I waved my arms and shouted, but the driver kept moving. By the time he reached the other side, a second truck was already lining up behind him. That was when I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. I called the HOA immediately. After being transferred twice, I finally got the president, Karen. Her tone was crisp, dismissive, and already annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. "Oh, that?" she said when I explained. "Yes, we approved temporary access. It's more efficient for construction." Approve. My bridge. Without asking. I told her, calmly, that the bridge had a strict weight limit and that cement trucks would damage it, or worse. She laughed. "If it collapsed, it wouldn't be our fault," she said. "You shouldn't build substandard structures if you don't want them used." That sentence told me everything. This wasn't ignorance. This wasn't entitlement. This was arrogance backed by money and lawyers. I sent an email that same hour. Photos, property surveys, load specifications, a clear written warning that any further use would be considered trespassing and that damages would be documented. Karen replied with one line: "Construction will continue as scheduled." The next morning, 3 more cement trucks crossed my bridge. By the 4th, I stopped trying to stop them. I started documenting. High-resolution photos, time-stamped, video showing the bridge flexing under load, cracks forming where none had existed before. I even hired an independent structural engineer to inspect it after hours, quietly. His report was blunt. Continued heavy vehicle use will cause failure. Liability will be catastrophic. That word stuck with me. Catastrophic. The HOA thought the bridge was a shortcut. Karen thought it was a bluff. But standing there, watching another cement truck grind its way across my property like it owned the land beneath it, I realized something important. They weren't afraid of warnings. They weren't afraid of signs. They weren't even afraid of lawsuit. So I stopped trying to scare them, and started letting them walk exactly where they wanted, straight into the consequences they'd already earned. By the end of that week, my bridge had become part of their routine. Cement trucks, flatbeds loaded with rebar, dump trucks hauling fill dirt. They crossed in daylight, at dusk, sometimes before sunrise, rolling over my property like it had been annexed without notice. Each pass left new scars. Loosened bolts, warped planks, hairline cracks spiderwebbing across the support. And still, the HOA acted like nothing was wrong. Karen never called back. Emails went unanswered. When I showed up at the HOA office with printed reports and photos, the receptionist refused to let me pass the lobby. "Construction matters are handled by the board," she said, rehearsed and bored. I know, I replied. That's why I'm here. She smiled tightly and slid my documents back across the counter like they were junk mail. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about the bridge. This was about power. The HOA had money, lawyers, contractors, and a long history of steamrolling anyone who didn't fold. They were used to compliance, used to people backing down once fines or threats showed up on letterhead. They assumed I'd do the same. So instead of yelling, I did something far more dangerous. I let them keep going. I installed cameras, discreet ones, mounted high enough to capture the full span. I upgraded the storage, backed everything up off-site, and logged every crossing in a simple spreadsheet. Date, time, vehicle type, estimated weight. I also did one more thing. I removed nothing. No barriers. No cones. No new signs. I didn't block access or confront drivers anymore. I waved them through like a cooperative neighbor who'd finally understood his place. The trucks increased. So did the damage. One afternoon, a foreman approached me while I was outside pretending to repair a fence. He was mid-40s, sunburned, clearly exhausted. "Hey," he said quietly. "Off the record, you sure this bridge is rated for our loads?" I looked at him, met his eyes, and told the truth. "No." He frowned. "Then why?" "You should probably talk to the HOA," I said calmly. His expression changed. Not defiant. Not arrogant. Concerned. 2 days later, that same foreman wasn't on site anymore. The trucks kept coming. That's when the engineer called me back. "I reran the numbers," he said. "If this continues, failure isn't a matter of if, it's when. And when it goes, it won't be subtle." I asked him one question. "If it fails under their vehicles, who's liable?" There was a pause. "Based on the documentation you've collected," he said. "Not you." That was all I needed. The trap wasn't about sabotage. I didn't weaken the bridge. I didn't touch a single bolt. I didn't interfere with their access. I simply let gravity, physics, and arrogance work together. The HOA believed that because they declared something approved, reality would comply. They believed money could override engineering. They believed I'd panic before they did. And the most dangerous belief of all? They believed consequences were for other people. By the following Monday, the bridge had developed a visible sag, small but undeniable. Anyone paying attention would have stopped immediately. But no one at the HOA was paying attention. They were too busy racing deadlines, burning budgets, and pushing crews harder to notice that the ground beneath their shortcut was quietly keeping score. And it was almost done counting. The failure didn't come with a dramatic snap or a cinematic collapse. It came with a sound like a deep, exhausted groan. I was inside my workshop when I felt it, vibration rolling through the ground, sharper than before, followed by a hollow crack that echoed across the water. Tools rattled on the wall. Birds exploded out of the trees. I stepped outside just in time to see the rear axle of a cement truck dip violently. The bridge hadn't fallen into the water. It had given up. One support beam had split clean through, shearing along a stress line any first-year engineering student would recognize. The deck sagged hard on one side, tilting the truck at an angle that froze everyone in place. The driver slammed the brakes. Concrete sloshed inside the drum. For a long second nobody moved. Then chaos arrived all at once. Workers shouted. Radios crackled. Someone yelled for the engine to be shut off. Another truck stopped short at the entrance, its driver staring in disbelief at the mess ahead of him. I didn't say a word. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The bridge hadn't collapsed catastrophically yet, but it was done. Unsafe. Unusable. And very clearly damaged under active commercial load. Within minutes, the site supervisor showed up, pale and sweating. "This bridge was approved for access," he said, more to himself than to me. "No," I replied calmly. "It wasn't." He looked at the truck, then at the sagging deck, then back at me. "You need to get this fixed immediately," he said. "We've got deadlines." I finally spoke the sentence I'd been holding for weeks. "This bridge is closed." He scoffed. "You can't just shut it down." I gestured to the cracked beam, the twisted metal, the truck trapped at a dangerous angle. "I didn't shut it down," I said. "Physics did." That's when Karen arrived. Black SUV. Perfect timing. She stormed out in sunglasses and heels, scanning the scene like it was a personal insult. When she saw the bridge, her jaw tightened. "What happened?" she demanded. The supervisor started talking fast. "Structural failure. Load issues. Unsafe conditions." She cut him off and turned to me. "This is unacceptable," she snapped. "You're going to be liable for delaying our project." I smiled, just a little. "I warned you," I said. "In writing. Multiple times." She waved a hand. "That sign was meaningless. This bridge should have been reinforced if you didn't want it used." That's when I handed her the folder. Printed emails. Certified letters. Engineer reports. Time-stamped photos. Video logs. Property surveys clearly marking the bridge as private infrastructure with no easement or shared access. Her face changed as she flipped pages. Not anger. Calculation. "You should have blocked access," she said sharply. "I was advised not to interfere," I replied. Interference could have shifted liability. That was the moment she realized something had gone very wrong. Within an hour, the sheriff arrived. Not because I called him, but because they did. They wanted someone to force me to reopen access. Instead, the deputy asked one simple question. Who authorized heavy commercial vehicles on a private bridge without an easement? No one answered. He walked the span, took photos, reviewed the documents, and shook his head. "This site is shut down," he said. Immediately. The cement truck was ordered to stay put until a recovery plan could be approved. Environmental inspectors were called due to spill risk. OSHA flagged the project for unsafe access routes. By sunset, the HOA's shortcut was sealed with official tape. The next morning, the consequences multiplied. The engineer filed his formal report. Insurance adjusters arrived. The contractor suspended work and pulled crews. The city froze permits pending investigation. And then the lawsuits started. The HOA's insurer denied coverage. Negligence. The contractor filed a claim for damages and delays. The cement company billed for vehicle recovery and lost load. Environmental authorities demanded assessments of potential contamination. Karen called me that afternoon. Her voice was tight. "We need to talk about resolving this privately." I let the silence stretch. "You had that chance," I said. By the end of the week, the HOA's lakeside expansion was dead. Not delayed, dead. Investors pulled out. Permits expired. Fines stacked up faster than they could be appealed. The bridge was condemned, yes, but that only mattered to them. To me it was proof. Proof that warnings matter. That documentation wins. That when arrogance meets reality, reality doesn't negotiate. They thought the bridge was weak. What they never realized was that it was the strongest position I could have taken. Because I didn't have to trap them. They walked in on their own. And when the bridge finally spoke, the entire HOA heard it loud and clear. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It arrived in waves. The first wave was silence. For 3 days after the shutdown, no trucks moved. No crews showed up. The lakeside project sat frozen behind fencing and warning tape, half-finished and bleeding money by the hour. The HOA office lights stayed on late, but no one returned my calls, because now they were the ones scrambling for answers. Then the letters started arriving. Certified. Registered. Overnight. The contractor was first. Their legal team informed the HOA that all work was suspended indefinitely due to unsafe access, unauthorized routing, and material risk exposure. They demanded compensation for idle equipment, labor penalties, and schedule overruns. Numbers that climbed into 7 figures before the second page. Next came the cement company. One of their trucks had been stranded for nearly 18 hours, partially loaded, leaking slurry that required environmental containment. They billed for recovery logistics, lost product, vehicle inspection, and regulatory compliance. The total made Karen's earlier confidence look laughable. Then OSHA showed up. Not because of me, but because a worker anonymously reported unsafe access conditions involving heavy equipment and non-rated infrastructure. Inspectors documented everything: the bridge damage, the lack of approved haul routes, the absence of contingency planning. They issued citations. Serious ones. The city followed. Permits were placed under review. Inspections were scheduled retroactively. The temporary access the HOA had claimed never existed was now a documented violation tied directly to the board's authorization. That's when Karen finally knocked on my door. No sunglasses this time. No heels. Just a folder clutched too tightly and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We can make this right," she said. I didn't invite her in. She started talking anyway, about misunderstandings, shared responsibility, unfortunate outcomes. She offered to pay for bridge repairs, then compensation, then a goodwill settlement, if I'd sign a release and agree not to cooperate further with investigators. I asked her one question. Which insurer is backing that offer? Her silence was answer enough. The HOA's insurance carrier had officially denied coverage. Gross negligence. Documented warnings ignored. Unauthorized use of private infrastructure. No safety net. Everything, from lawsuits to fines to rebuild costs, was landing directly on the HOA and its board, including her. By the end of the month, the numbers were staggering. Millions in project losses. Hundreds of thousands in fines and fees. Legal bills multiplying by the week. Homeowners furious as special assessments were announced to cover unexpected liabilities. They wanted someone to blame. They found her. An emergency board meeting was called. Then another. Then a closed-door session with attorneys that lasted nearly 6 hours. Karen resigned 2 days later. Her empire, the consulting firm, the development partnerships, the political clout she loved to wield, collapsed just as quietly as my bridge had sagged. Contracts dried up. Partners distanced themselves. Her name became synonymous with the project everyone warned her about. The HOA tried to survive. They raised dues, cut amenities, sold off land they'd planned to develop. Lawsuits dragged on, settlements drained reserves, and homeowners moved out as fast as they could list. As for me, I rebuilt the bridge. Stronger, properly rated, permitted, with bollards, barriers, and cameras that made its private status unmistakable. The city signed off. Inspectors approved it. Engineers praised it. No HOA vehicle ever crossed it again. Sometimes people ask if I regret not stopping them sooner. I don't. Because I didn't set a trap. I set boundaries. They chose to ignore them. And when you drive heavy machinery across something that was never yours, despite warnings, documentation, and reality itself, you don't get to act surprised when it finally gives way. The bridge didn't ruin them. Their certainty did. Time didn't heal what the HOA broke. It exposed it. In the months that followed Karen's resignation, the neighborhood changed in ways no rebrand or emergency meeting could fix. The board tried damage control, new leadership, apologetic newsletters, promises of transparency, but the trust was already gone. Homeowners had receipts now. They'd seen the documents, the lawsuit, the special assessments that arrived without warning, demanding thousands per household to cover legal fees and settlements tied directly to the bridge disaster. People who had never questioned the HOA before started asking uncomfortable questions. Why were warnings ignored? Who approved the access route? Why did one person have so much unchecked authority? The answers all pointed in the same direction. And that direction didn't include me anymore. The contractor settled first. Quietly. The terms weren't public, but the effect was obvious. Half-finished structures were dismantled, equipment vanished overnight, and the once ambitious lakeside expansion was reduced to empty land and sunk costs. The cement company followed. Then the environmental agencies. Each resolution chipped away at what little credibility the HOA had left. Property values dipped. Listings multiplied. HOA under legal restructuring became a phrase realtors avoided out loud, but everyone knew what it meant. As for Karen, she disappeared from public view. Her consulting firm dissolved within a year. Former partners removed her name from website. Industry contacts stopped returning calls. The confidence she once weaponized couldn't survive documented negligence and legal judgment. Power, it turns out, is fragile when it's built on assumption instead of accountability. One afternoon, nearly a year later, I got a letter from the HOA's new board. Not a demand. Not a threat. An apology. They acknowledged the unauthorized use of my bridge, the ignored warnings, and the damage caused by prior leadership. They confirmed, formally and permanently, that no HOA vehicle, contractor, or agent would ever access my property again. It was signed by every board member. I framed it, not out of pride, but as a reminder. The new bridge stood solid by then. Reinforced steel, proper load ratings, clear signage, cameras that recorded everything. It blended into the landscape like it had always belonged there, quiet, unremarkable, unchallenged. Exactly how boundaries should be. Sometimes neighbors stop and ask about the old project, about the collapse, about the lawsuits they heard rumors of. I keep it simple. They used something that wasn't theirs, I say, and refuse to listen. That's usually enough, because the truth doesn't need drama. The HOA thought authority meant immunity. They thought speed mattered more than safety. They thought warnings were optional. They were wrong on all counts. I didn't win by being louder. I didn't win by being reckless. I didn't win by fighting them on their terms. I won by documenting, by waiting, by letting reality do what it always does. In the end, the bridge didn't just collapse a project. It collapsed an illusion, the illusion that power without permission lasts forever. And once that illusion was gone, there was nothing left for them to stand on.